Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes to see if there's anybody else who wants to attend, then we'll shortly start. Okay, so I'll start with the session now. Welcome to today's session. As you can see from the title, this is all about researching your traineeship. So we'll provide you information on how to research, mainly for a European traineeship, but there are some bits of information that might be useful if you are looking at a traineeship outside of Europe. There will be an opportunity to ask any questions at the end. You can do this using the Q&A function, which my colleague Andrew will be monitoring. What we'll do then is we'll answer these questions live in case anybody else has the same question, so we can give the answer to everybody. So this is how today's session will look. We're going to start with where to start with researching. Research is really, really important. You'll hear me say this quite a lot throughout the presentation. We're going to then look at what to expect in the workplace. I'm aware that working might be something new for some of you, might be something you've never done before. Just some general things to consider before and during your placement. It's not what we want to think about, but there are some potential problems that could come about, and we're going to go over potential solutions. And then, as I said, the question and answer session at the end. Feel free to post questions throughout as well, but we will be answering them at the end of the session. So I'd like to start the session with some useful information on starting with your research. So if you are eligible to undertake a traineeship, hopefully you'll find all of this information quite useful. And as I've said already, with most things, preparation is key, and the preparation starts quite far in advance. So students are usually asked to consider looking into the placement it's usually about 1 year in advance. So for example, if you're due to go abroad next September, it's now that the research should start, the application's open and things like that. So the first thing you will need to check is that your degree programme allows you to complete a traineeship abroad. So this can include research placement. So if you're completing a research placement, this is often classed as a traineeship. Your degree programme might have a professional training year, for example, or you might be able to complete a shorter term traineeship for a semester. What I would like to highlight is traineeships must be a minimum of 2 months, which should meet the minimum requirement for most of you if you're completing it as part of your degree. So what students who have the opportunity to undertake a traineeship, you can also do it in the summer months. So that's outside of the term time, but you still must obtain approval from your academic school's exchange coordinator if you did want to do this. So regardless of whether you want to do it as part of your degree or during the summer, you must still get approval from your academic school. So if you're not sure of who your school's exchange coordinator is, you can search Spend Time Abroad on the internet, and you can check your school's page and the contact details can be found there. Or you can contact the Erasmus team at erasmus@cardiff.ac.uk and we'll be able to provide you with those details. As well as the exchange coordinator, each academic school will also have a professional training year coordinator. And this is a dedicated staff member who can advise you on the many aspects of completing a traineeship. Often they advise on traineeships in the UK, but they can usually advise on traineeships abroad as well. You will see here that we have included some useful information, some useful websites, to help you start with your search. So the first one there, Prospects. This website holds a vast range of information in relation to working abroad in various countries all across the world. The country guides will provide information on the work life, for example, language requirements and the job market. So they're useful even if you're looking for things maybe after graduation. And similarly, Target Jobs have also produced country guides, and these help to provide guidance on working life in each country as well. I think these guides will be very helpful in assisting you to decide which country you might wish to work in if you do have options. Additionally, you might have heard of Going Global, and this is a useful website in helping find jobs all around the world. So they're very similar websites. When looking on each of these websites, please ensure that the duration meets the requirements of the Erasmus programme, so that 2-month minimum requirement plus the requirements of your academic score. You may come across some traineeships or internships that are a bit of a shorter duration, so please do bear that in mind. Once you've got a bit of an idea of where you'd like to undertake your placement, the website of your host organisation should also be a useful resource. So the information provided on this website should give you an overview of the company, what's expected of employees, and what you can expect from them as an employer. What you'll also find is they often have their values and their aims noted on their website as well, and this might be helpful in your decision making. If you are aware of the type of placement you'd like to complete already, or once you've had this approved, it may also be beneficial to speak to some past participants who have completed a similar placement. I know that hearing about a student's experience is always one of the most useful sources of information. So do get in touch with us at Global Opportunities or your exchange coordinator again, and you can ask to be put in touch with these students. We can't guarantee that someone will have undertaken the same placement as you, but of course we can check, but they may have completed a placement in the same country, for example, so I'm sure they'll still have some really useful tips. So next is what to consider. So as mentioned already, and as I will continue to mention throughout this session, it's really important that you research your placement well to ensure that it is the right fit for you. Once you've decided on your placement and had this approved by your academic score as well as the host organisation, you will begin preparing for your time abroad and looking into the practicalities of this. I would also like to mention at this point that although it is your responsibility to put your arrangements in place, your school and Global Opportunities can provide lots of information along the way. So overall, it's for you to research and look into, but we will help as much as we can. You will also be required to attend a pre-departure session hosted by us, so this usually takes place a couple of months prior to the start date of your placement. Some of the first things to consider, and probably one of the most obvious, is where is your placement based? Moving to a new country and adapting to a new lifestyle will be challenging, but it'll also be very rewarding. You'll need to consider where you're going to live during your entire time abroad, so whether this be a 2-month placement or a year-long placement. Think about how far away this is from your place of work. How will you get there? Is there reliable public transport, for example, and at the times you're required to travel, or are you able to walk to work? And thinking about things, is it safe to walk, depending on the times of your job, depending on what internship you're undertaking. So all of these things will need to be considered when choosing where to live. The last thing you want is to be in an area where there's only a bus every couple of hours or something like that. So make sure there's good public transport to allow you to get to your placement. As well as where to live, you'll need to think about the cost of living along with your general living arrangements. So you'd want to look into what the difference in cost is between your host city and Cardiff. Consider whether you want to live alone or whether you'd potentially like a house or a flat share. If you're not completing a placement at a university, you may have to find private accommodation. So your host organisation may be able to assist with finding this, but this is why research is really, really important. Something else to consider is whether or not you'll be paid. So it's often assumed that all traineeships are paid, and this is not always the case. If you are fortunate enough to be paid, please make sure you're aware of your expected salary. You don't want sort of a shock when you get there to find out it's less than you were expecting, for example. And whilst abroad, you'll still have access to any student loans or grants as if you were in Cardiff, so any student finance. But you may also be eligible to receive a monthly grant through the Erasmus programme or any successor programme that we're involved in. The other thing to mention is if you are looking to complete a placement outside of Europe, if it is a full year placement, you may be able to apply for a one-off grant through the Professional Training Year Abroad Award Scheme. But I do need to just highlight that these bursaries are not guaranteed. They're reviewed annually, and they are subject to confirmation for next year, but that's for outside of Europe. So next, I just want to chat about working hours. So I've touched on this already, some things to consider about where you live in. But are you aware of these? Do you know what time you're expected to work? Have you discussed with your supervisor, and are you happy with the arrangements? You need to make sure that you're happy with everything before you start your placement. Some things to think about are the working days longer or shorter than that of the UK? As I said at the beginning, this may be a big change when transitioning from life as a student in Cardiff, especially if you've not previously worked before or are not currently working alongside your degree. So just have a think about any adjustments you may need to make to your usual routine. Because adapting to a new way of living and a brand new culture is a great skill to talk about with any future employers. So it will be very worthwhile, but there may be lots of differences. So that's why I really do want to stress that research is key for this. Another important aspect to consider is if you will require a work permit or a visa. So with the UK's transition period coming to an end on the 31st of December of this year, it is likely that anyone who works abroad for a significant amount of time may require a visa or a work permit. We hope to have further information on this shortly, and we don't have this to hand at the moment, but your host organisation should be able to advise on this if you are required to get a visa. If this is something that you need to think about the cost of it, for example, and whether you need a sponsor. Sometimes the host can be a sponsor, sometimes you will need to find your own. So I just want to mention that we are not visa experts, but we will do our best to advise or point you in the right direction of somebody who can when you are looking at these placements. The final point on this slide is relating to any special requirements you may need to make your employer aware of. So you may have a disability that you need to disclose. There may be some religious practices that might impact your working day, or even things like dietary requirements. So if you have anything to share with your employer, it is really important that they're informed of this in advance. This is just to make sure that the relevant provisions can be put in place for you. So now I'm going to talk about some of the things to consider in the workplace whilst abroad, some of the practicalities. Some of you may be used to working if you've done so previously, but as I've said before, this may be something new for a lot of you. You will need to ensure that you're aware of the general practicalities of working abroad and just working in general. I've already mentioned one of the main practicalities in the previous slide, which is working hours. So just make sure you're aware of your start and end times, as well as things like lunch or break times that you might be entitled to. You want to make sure you turn up for work on time, especially on your first day. Prior to this, you will need to ensure that your start date is confirmed and the time you're expected to be in work on your first day. You'll need to be aware of this, more importantly, to plan travel appropriately. So you don't want to be arriving in your host country in the early hours of the morning of the day you're due to start, for example. So you need to make sure you get there in plenty of time. Another important aspect of working life to think about is dress code. So consider if you need to pack a suit or a smart dress or smart trousers, or is your workplace more casual? Lots of this you'll want to find out before you go, so you don't have to worry about buying new clothes once you're abroad. But obviously think about your packing as well. You don't want to pack too much because you will be limited on your luggage. You are likely to have some form of initial induction during your first week, and as part of this, you may be required to take along some documentation or form of identification as part of this process. So do find this out in advance. Please make sure your employer lets you know anything that you might need in advance of your departure. The last thing you want to do is leave something at home that you might need on your first day. You may also be provided with reading material to prepare you for your first week, but again, your employer should be sending you this. So if maybe it's getting a bit close to your start date and you haven't heard anything, it might be worth just following up with them to check if there's anything that you need to do. As with any employer, so whether that be in the UK or abroad, all employees are expected to adhere to professional and personal values whilst in the workplace. So if the company's values are not sent to you, you should be able to find these on the organisation's website. They'll contain the company's views on things like courtesy, teamwork, responsibility, and commitment to personal development. Some personal values they might include may refer to honesty, integrity, reliability, and passion. So it's always good if you can sort of refer back to some of the things mentioned on the website when talking to the employer. Bear in mind that not only are you likely to be in a new work environment compared to a study environment, but you'll also be experiencing a work culture that is very different to the UK. Your supervisor is likely to share some of the cultural norms with you, but it's still important to research this in advance. So going back to those websites on the first slide, or just doing some of your own general research or contacting those past participants. So it's always good to have some information before you go so you can be as prepared as possible. Challenges in the workplace is the next thing I'm going to talk about. So we will always say that any time spent abroad will be extremely rewarding, both professionally and personally. However, I think it goes without saying that you will have obstacles or challenges to overcome at some point during your placement. These should not be viewed as something negative and should not be a negative part of your experience, but it should be seen as personal development. And this goes for whether you're completing a traineeship or a study placement or volunteering, for example. Any time abroad will allow you to personally develop. So I'm going to talk today about some challenges that you might come across in the workplace and how you might be able to resolve these. So these are just some examples. Hopefully you won't have to come across them, or there may be some additional ones, but the aim is just to try and prepare you as much as possible for some of the generic problems you might come across. So you may come across challenges such as feeling dissatisfied with the nature of the work that you're being given. And you may wish to discuss your ability to complete the work. So think about, are you being given tasks that are above your level of responsibility as well? Or perhaps being given tasks that are below your level of responsibility. Another thing is you might be struggling with your workload and you might worry about being able to complete tasks to the required standard or by the set deadline. So these are all quite common problems in the workplace. There are a number of ways in which you may be able to cope with these challenges, as well as some potential solutions. For example, if the nature of this work is not quite what you expected, consider how you'll address this. So one of the first things to think about is what's the employer's view on this? So think of it from their point of view. They're currently assuming that you're happy with your work, the work you're being given. Unless you tell them, they're not going to know otherwise. But what you do need to prepare and think about is how you approach the discussion with your manager or supervisor, because this will have quite a significant impact on the outcome of this challenge that you want to discuss. The first thing is to avoid complaining. So even when addressing problems in the workplace, you should maintain professionalism. I know this can be quite difficult when you've got something that you want to share, but it is important that you do stay professional. You could be proactive, so you can gain insight into the work you're interested in and ask your manager if you can gain experience in it, for example. If you've been given previous tasks, just make sure that they know that they will be completed so you're not taking on too much. Think about what you want to achieve, so you may need to reassess this. You can assess whether you can achieve your original targets in the current environment, and you may have to alter them if necessary. So what we want you to do is take the placement and its challenges as a learning experience, and this will then help you make informed decisions about your career. You might find that that is exactly the career for you. You might find that it's not the career for you. So we've had lots of different scenarios in the past. If you're having issues with the ability to complete the work, as I said, remember that this is a learning experience. But what we don't want you to do is panic. So you can always ask for clarification, and following that you can ask for help, and you can even ask for feedback. So this goes a long way in the workplace, asking for feedback and asking for assistance. It's not a problem to do that. I think employers would prefer you to do that rather than struggle. And it's always a good idea, as I'm sure you're aware with studying, it's great to take notes, so you've always got them to refer to afterwards. Workload is a common problem in the workplace, and if you feel you have too many tasks, make sure you discuss this with your supervisor to make them aware of your situation. As I said at the beginning of this slide, if you don't tell them, they're not going to be aware of how you're feeling. Again, you are always able to ask for help. Alternatively, as I said at the beginning as well, if you have too little work, be proactive and ask if you can be assistance with anything else. With regards to level of responsibility, if you're a bit unsure of this, if you feel like you're being given too much, it does need to be discussed with your manager or supervisor. And communication is key here. So preparation is key and communication is key when researching a traineeship and being in the workplace. If you feel you have too little responsibility, what you do need to look at is that your placement should be seen as a gradual incline, and you are likely to start with smaller tasks. So it may be difficult, but do try to maintain a positive attitude in these cases, as this does go a long way in the workplace. But being realistic is the most important thing as well, and all jobs have less exciting or less enjoyable aspects. That's the case in all workplaces. So, but if after a few weeks you feel that you're not being challenged enough, do ask if you can gain experience in more complex tasks, or you can volunteer to assist colleagues with tasks you're confident with, providing this doesn't have an impact on the tasks that you've already been given. If you need to discuss any issues or concerns with your manager, think about your approach before the meeting. Identify the issue, establish what the ideal outcome would be. So you want to go into that meeting knowing what you want from this discussion. Make sure you meet with the relevant staff member as well. So whether it be your direct line manager or whether it be somebody else, it needs to be the relevant staff member. You want to raise the issue in a reasonable and that professional manner that we spoke about a little bit earlier on. An example would be to start with something positive. So don't start with the negative in the meeting, start with something positive, talk about what you've enjoyed, and then make suggestions as to how you could be getting more from your placement. Some top tips now when raising concerns, and the first one is don't panic. Again, nobody will know you're having problems unless you make them aware of it. The other thing to consider is whether your timing is appropriate. So make sure that you have plenty of time to discuss your concerns, that you're not sort of asking to have a meeting with your manager at an extremely busy time when they can't give you their full attention. So do make sure your timing is appropriate as well. And preparation is key, as we said throughout this. So be clear on the issues and the solution. So know what you want before you go into that meeting. You want to be professional, but you'll also want to be honest. So it can often be quite difficult to combine those together. But by being honest, you will get a lot further in the workplace, even if this does mean that you have to admit fault. Everyone makes mistakes, it's absolutely natural, but the last thing you want to do is cover it up and not discuss this if it's going to have an impact on anything. So I do hope that if you complete a traineeship abroad, that you do not come across too many of these issues, but the aim of this session is to prepare you for a variety of scenarios and offer you some potential solutions. And of course, when you're abroad, you can always contact your school, your exchange coordinator, your personal tutor, or the Global Opportunities team if you do require support. So you've always got plenty of support networks still back here in the UK as well. So that's it for researching your traineeship session. This is just a reminder to let you know that our Discover Global Opportunities Week will be going on up until Friday. We'll be running various sessions throughout this week. There are sessions to cover all areas of interest, so whether it be Erasmus International Exchange or whether it be partner sessions. The schedule for the rest of the day can be seen here. So you've got the Studying in New Zealand and Australia session at 1 p.m, the University of Tasmania giving a session, so that's one of our partners at 2:30. And if you have any questions for our Global Opportunities Ambassadors, so they're students who've taken part in all of our activities, so whether it be summer placement, Erasmus International Exchange, they are there to help today, so please do go along at 5 o'clock if you have any questions. For any more information and to find out the schedule for the rest of the week, because we've got things going on tomorrow and Friday as well, search Discover Global Opportunities on the internet and you'll get all the information that you need for this week. So the last thing I want to ask of you is that as this is the first time we've run a virtual Discover Global Opportunities Week, we would really be interested in getting your feedback. So if you could just spare 2 minutes to provide your thoughts, we'd really appreciate it. You can follow this link, so this recording will be made available online shortly, or you can find the link on our main campaign page when you search Discover Global Opportunities Week on the internet. And that is it. So if you have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A facility now, and myself and Andrew will facilitate that. But yeah, please do go along to all the other sessions this week. We're here to answer questions even after today's session. You can email go@cardiff.ac.uk or erasmus@cardiff.ac.uk. But yeah, ready to open the floor to take questions.
We have a question ready and waiting.
Great.
The question is, can a first year's... Sorry, I can hear myself in the background. Can a first year student apply for a traineeship? If so, what is the best time to apply?
So it's not necessarily, it is related to the year, but it's also related to your degree programme. So if you are in first year and your degree programme has a professional training year, for example, you generally apply in your second year. But you can provide more information today if you want, and we can see if we can help you now during this session if you'd like to give information about what degree you're completing, or you can email us with all the information and we can provide a specific response there. But you usually start planning around a year in advance if your degree allows you to undertake a traineeship. But we do have that summer option as well. So if you wanted to, for example, to go this summer coming, so it's summer 2021, we suggest you try and look as early as possible and get a discussion in with your exchange coordinator so they can approve your placement. But it is dependent generally on degree programme for semester or a full year.
That's the only question we have at the moment. So if you have any other questions, please do let us know. We're here ready and waiting.
Yeah, we will hang around for a good few minutes. But if there's nothing else, if you don't have any questions, you're not required to stay. As we said, this recording will be made available on the internet, and we're always available on email as well.
We have another question.
Oh.
Is it possible to do a traineeship as a joint honours student?
So potentially, it just depends on what your joint honours subjects are. What you'd need to do if, for example, your one school was able to offer you a traineeship opportunity, you would need to check that your second school would then also be able to approve it. So it does get a little bit more complicated with joint honours. It does just depend on what schools you are enrolled in. What you can do as well is if you search Spends Time Abroad on the internet, there's more information about the Erasmus programme, the International Exchange programme, and what you can do as part of your degree. So each school has a page and it'll let you know whether you can complete a traineeship or whether it's a study placement. But quite often traineeships are incorporated into your degree programme if you have a year in industry, professional training year or something like that.
We have another question.
Yeah.
How is a traineeship different from a year in industry?
So they're largely the same thing. So a year in industry, and I know students often complete those in the UK, but if your school allows, you may be able to find a potential placement abroad. So you need to just check with your either PTY coordinator or year in industry coordinator and the exchange coordinator as to whether they would allow you to complete that year in industry outside of the UK. But essentially it's the same thing, it's just you're completing it outside, how you're completing it abroad. Any other questions?
No others coming through at the moment. That's good questions so far.
Okay, I'm happy to hang on for a few more minutes. I think that might be it now. Yeah, I think that might be everything. So we'll close this session now, and as I said, if you have any questions, please do email us. We're always happy to help.